You're telling me that I must cover up my textbooks or I'll lose them. Okay. This happened when I was 8 or 9 IIRC. Here in my country we got something called National Textbook Program. Roughly it works like this. Every year, students that go to public primary and middle school receive textbooks of every one of the subjects they're gonna learn about that year. History, math, geography, etc. So the textbooks are yours to study and you must take care of it and then return it at the end of the year. At least where I live, the schools would ask students to cover up their textbooks with a plastic cover or something so it gets protected from rain, dirt and stuff. You can buy those covers in any market or stationery shop. The problem is that public education is meant to be for everyone. So there are some kids that are taken to school by their parents in large SUVs and others that have to go to school, otherwise they wouldn't have anything to eat for the whole day. It's tough. So this girl, a classmate of mine, was from a poor family, much closer to the second group I mentioned than to the first. We received our textbooks, and while everyone covered up theirs within the first week, she didn't. So the teachers and school supervisors and coordinators started to ask her repeatedly to cover her textbook, and as an 8 to 9-year-old, she just didn't react and simply agreed with every demand. What would she do? Admit to everyone that their parents couldn't afford to cover up her textbooks? I don't even know if she understood that. This go for weeks until the shawl sent a note addressed to her parents informing that if she didn't cover her books, she wouldn't be allowed to take them home with her anymore. The next day, the class starts as usual. Teacher asks everyone to open their textbooks, and all of a sudden that girl take her textbook from her backpack and it is covered up in toilet paper. Yes, toilet paper and scotch tape. Her mother got tired of all that kind of humiliating demands and just complied. The girl kept her books, and I just can't recall what happened after this. But looking back at the moment, it's really nice to remember the look on our teacher's face when she saw that textbook and interrupted the class to take it to the supervisor. Edit. Typo and answering some frequent comments. 1. I live in Brazil. Paper bags are not very common here. We use plastic bags since I can remember too. Some of the comments are implying that buying a cover for a book is something cheap that anyone can afford. Some people actually have to choose between covering a book, buying a notebook, even buying a toothbrush, and buying food. It's really not that easy, especially in a third world country. I've seen it happen more times since I'm a teacher myself today. I had a teacher threaten me with detention for not having a book covered. So I covered it with the detention form. Apparently she considered that insubordination. I think that must be the hardest thing about being a teacher. There are gonna be some kids who know more about deprivation and tough choices before their voice cracks than the teacher will ever experience. A friend of mine was a prefect in her school and found out that one of the students who was labeled a problem child by the teachers for skipping school, missing homework, persistent tardiness and the like was single-handedly acting as a full-time cater for her dementia-suffering grandma. Literally every one of the problem behaviors was rooted in this. I'm in no doubt that her case was not unique, much as I wish it was. My wife took my 8-year-old son to the book fair at his school yesterday. She chatted with the cashier while he looked around. Since we both grew up poor, she is mindful of things like this story. And so she asked if she could anonymously donate some money for the kids whose parents couldn't afford books, as well as some for the school library to get new books. The cashier almost broke down crying. She just had a 4th grade girl tell her the book fair was dumb and she didn't want to go. After talking further, The girl admitted she had never gotten a book from a book fair because her parents couldn't afford the extra cost. It had been weighing on the cashier, and she was trying to figure out how she could afford to buy this girl a book from her own money. The cashier was not only able to help the girl out, but was able to buy books for several more students. It cost us less than a dinner out as a family, and children got to be a part of something with their peers while fostering a love for reading. Money well spent. If you can, try to help where you can. The difference, even the smallest thing to you, can be huge to someone else. We used paper bags on textbooks. I always used brown paper bags on my books. I'd doodle on them until they were full, then wrap it again for another round. We used to use old wallpaper, or some used Christmas wrapping paper. I almost got kicked out of middle school in generic suburban USA for something similar. We also had loaned textbooks and were required to cover them. In 6th grade, my homeroom social studies teacher decided we needed to make our own book cover, and specifically have pictures of all the happy people from around the world we would learn about. In 6th grade, I didn't really have a happy life and didn't feel like pretending everyone in the world should and did. So I just didn't cover my book. I was singled out, yelled at, sent to the principals, and finally threatened with a $20 fine for replacement if I didn't cover the book. This was 1980, and $20 was a lot more money then. It was certainly a lot of money to a lower middle class kid. So I snuck out of middle school and across the parking lot to the high school on my lunch. My brother went there, so I knew the bookstore sold covers for 10 cents, which was less than lunch would cost. I went back to Petty Dictator's class with a shiny new school-themed book cover on my book. Go Spartans! And that, my friends, is how the principal started the process to get me out of his school before I could be an incident on his record. Jokes on him, though. They tried to toss me for being intellectually inadequate, and my parents took offense. A battery of tests later, and I got thrown into a gifted program instead, which pretty much altered the course of my life. Sometimes your destiny really can turn on a dime. I used free newspapers you get in the mail. The ones with only advertisement. There were also ads for strippers and escorts in that free newspaper. Was a fun discovery for the teacher if I had to hand in my books. If they need to be covered, why wouldn't the school district just do it at a fraction of the cost? Buying items in bulk usually receives a discount. 1 equals X, 4,000 equals X. This was a thing when I was at school, too. However, it was handled by using the first lesson of the class in question for each pupil to wrap their textbook in sugar paper supplied by the school, with the teacher instructing on how to achieve this without damaging the book. Then again, this was in the UK, back when state schools had enough funding to provide such things. Back in the 1970s and 80s, my school did this. Yes, I'm old. Of course. Back then groceries came in paper sacks. There weren't the plastic bags that are everywhere now. My folks were in the second category as well. My father did his best. Worked at a factory and also did lawn care for folks as a second job. The teacher would bring in quite a few of those paper bags that we would cut up and put on our text books. Some families would also donate bags as well. It's heartbreaking that a school would tell a student to cover their books or their books would be taken from them. Some of the comments are implying that buying a cover for a book is something cheap that anyone can afford. Some people actually have to choose between covering a book, buying a notebook, even buying a toothbrush, and buying food. It's really not that easy. especially in a third world country. I've seen it happen more times. Since I'm a teacher myself today. Absolutely correct. People need to calm to fuck down. Poor people exist, and your points that it can very easily come down to either buy a cover or eat. People have like no compassion sometimes or foresight.
This is a textbook case.
I remember covering mine with paper bags. The insides are pretty smooth and had no logos. You guys didn't have paper bags? Is that a US thing? When I was a kid, 70s and 80s, our school provided pre-printed book covers that we took home with us. And the books. The first day of classes, and either had our parents cover our books or did it ourselves. In 1975, the district started selling ads on the covers. One of the first advertisers was a chain where you could get an eye exam and buy glasses. This was before LensCrafters and same-day glasses. So it was just an optometrist who worked with an optician. But they both worked for a chain. My father was an optometrist who owned his own place, and his college buddy was his optician. When I brought home those book covers with the ads, a furor erupted at home. My father didn't care, but my stepmother refused to cover our books. She ran up to the school the next day to demand to know why her kids should be advertising for the competition. This was embarrassing to my sister and me. Of course. But she stood her ground. After some consultation with the district, the school's solution was simple and elegant. Just turn the covers over. They were blank on the back. Less than insert eye roll here. Op. Your experience in Brazil mirrors my US school district. Some kids at the same school in the same district walk around with AirPods and Yeezys, and others rely on the good programs for 3 meals a day. Our district started to supply a supper meal after returning to in-person this year. 1980s NZ. I covered my books with Duraseal. The sticky book covering that once it was stuck on would rip things coming off. We also used wallpaper, so my books looked like the living room. Used lingerie posters. My neighbor had a lingerie store, and I asked for some promotional material, and it is really sturdy. Good quality paper. Wrapped it together with my mom. She found it brilliant. In America, there was when I was in school a lunch problem. Some kid's parent made too much money to be able to be granted full lunch, so they had to struggle paying or not get anything and ask other kids for handouts. If you had outstanding balance, you couldn't graduate. Many people cannot grasp the concept of poverty. They find it hard to believe it that things that are simple to do for them are luxuries to other people.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.